The story begins with the protagonist's birth, which was marked by an accident involving the ambulance that was transporting his mother. From elementary school through high school, he always developed a fever before every exam. For 20 years, his omakuju was consistently filled with bad luck. Even when he went on trips or vacations with his friends, it would always start raining, earning him the nickname, the God of Pestilence. As dungeons began appearing in the world, the protagonist, Fuku, applied to become a hunter and was placed in the F rank. One day, while sitting in the garden, CG, along with a boy and a girl, approached him to ask about the group's share fund. CG informed him that he had been doubling it since the previous week. Fuku was surprised to hear this, and CG warned him that he would have to pay his share because they were a group, and no other group would accept the God of Pestilence. Fuku reluctantly handed over the money, but CG snatched it and told him that from now on, they would be working separately. Fundraising was something only Fuku could do, and CG even found it amusing to call their group a group at all. The other boy commented that it was a clever tax system, and CG agreed, saying that monthly, he assigned useless roles to others, but somehow Fuku was lucky enough to still benefit from it. Suddenly, it started raining, and Fuku ran away, reminded of the bad luck that had haunted him since birth. It felt like a curse. He made his way to the Hunter Guild to take on a quest. But as soon as he arrived, people began gossiping and calling him the God of Pestilence. They kept their distance, avoiding him. That day, Fuku ended up heading into the Goblin Cave alone once again. When he entered, he saw a sign posted outside, warning of no entry and prohibiting mineral extraction. A man was there sealing the entrance and mentioned that no hunters should be inside as it was the annual Goblin Festival and no one wanted to risk their lives. However, Fuku didn't know this and had already entered before the entrance was closed behind him. As he began mining, the cave seemed unusually quiet, and he thought he might be able to handle it if any goblins appeared. But suddenly, he discovered a large group of goblins approaching, ready to attack. Fuku grabbed his bag and started running, wondering what was happening. An elf watched from a distance as Fuku was chased by the goblins. One of the goblins snatched all of Fuku's gear, and soon he found himself trapped with nowhere to go. Ahead of him was a deep hole, and with goblins closing in from behind, he drew his sword to defend himself. But to his dismay, his sword was already broken. As the goblins drew nearer, Fuku lost his footing and fell into the hole. When Fuku opened his eyes, he saw a woman standing there. He asked if he was still alive. She stood up, referring to him as an interesting person, someone who had come this far despite his bad luck. She wondered if he might be the luckiest person in history. Fuku tried to understand what she meant, and then she revealed that she was the goddess of luck. She conjured 99 luck boxes and 1 calamity box and asked him to choose. She explained that if he had even a bit of luck on his side, he might be able to live a better life. Fuku hesitated, thinking about the calamity. The goddess urged him to pick, assuring him that those who made it to the deepest parts of the dungeon would be rewarded. However, she said that it wouldn't be fun to simply hand him the reward without a challenge. So as a proper test of luck, she proposed a bet. She told him to open one of the boxes, insisting that even if his luck was only average, there wouldn't be any real danger. If he refused, however, he would be doomed to live in the dungeon forever. Fuku, knowing he had never been lucky, realized that the same bad luck had followed him. He reluctantly chose a box and it turned out to be the calamity box, the 1 in a 100. A dark aura poured into him. Then the goddess explained that he had gained a skill called Great Inversion. She told him that this calamity skill would invert everything, reversing all the power he had accumulated up until then. Fuku was shocked, and the goddess added that if he was going to hate anyone, he should curse his own lack of luck. However, she hinted that he might get another chance if he chose to worship her. One of Fuku's stats began to decrease and suddenly the ground beneath him broke open, releasing hot water. Both he and the goddess were surprised by what had happened. Fuku, overwhelmed by the hot water, thought he would end up as a complete failure. He managed to crawl out of the hot spring, exhausted from the intense heat. To his shock, he found himself surrounded by goblins, all holding boss emblems in their hands, led by the Queen Goblin. Fuku remembered that once a year, goblins risked their lives in the hunt to choose a partner for their queen. Realizing it was the same day of the year, Fuku understood what was happening. The goblins began to approach him, and he tried to run, but he slipped and fell. Desperate, he picked up a small stone and threw it at one of the goblins, but it had little effect. Suddenly, a giant rock fell from above, crushing the goblin. Fuku realized that the cave was collapsing, and many of the rocks were about to kill the goblins. After some time, only Fuku and the Queen Goblin remained. She looked at him with an odd, affectionate expression, and Fuku quickly realized that her behavior was strange. The Queen Goblin started chasing him, wanting him to become her partner. Fuku kept running, denying her advances and feeling as though he truly was cursed. The scene then shifted to the outside of the dungeon where Fuku now had the boss emblem. He wondered what he should do with it. The item was meant to benefit the whole team, but no matter how he looked at it, it seemed like a cursed item. That day, Fuku learned that luck was determined from birth. However, little did he know that luck was also a power capable of changing everything. A girl noticed the item in Fuku's hand. Her team was asking him for money and insisted that the emblem was worthless. Fuku replied that all the other things had been swept away except for that emblem. The data boy confronted Fuku, and the girls said they trusted him as a teammate, but he wasn't like that. CG asked everyone to calm down, explaining that Fuku had been having a hard time. He analyzed the emblem and found it had no value, so throwing a tantrum would be a waste. They decided to let it slide for that day. Fuku asked if that was really true. Has Seiji reached to take the emblem from Fuku? The girl who had seen the emblem earlier stepped forward. She asked Seiji if he was sure the emblem had no value. They asked who she was. She apologized for not introducing herself earlier and said her name was AES, a state-certified class analyst. She said she couldn't allow such an attempted fraud. Others around them were curious and whispered about the word fraud. CG told her not to be so harsh and said he was only doing a favor as a good teammate. He added that this kind of thing often happened among party members. He mentioned that even if it was a legendary class item, it would be worth enough to buy a mansion. Hearing that, the others were shocked and wondered if Fuku's party was trying to steal from him. They called in scum. Ayas said that it was a kind of fraud to take an item without properly informing the owner. She told Seiji he should be ashamed of himself. Fuku insisted that there must be some mistake. CG turned to leave, but warned Ace that she might regret her words in the future. After Fuku's party left, Ace apologized to Fuku, saying she couldn't stay silent after seeing what happened. Fuku asked her to just let him go. She hesitated, holding his hand briefly, then embarrassed, she quickly apologized again and bowed before leaving. Fuku then asked if the emblem was really a legendary item since it looked more like a cursed object, and it seemed impossible that someone like him could have something so valuable. She denied his doubts and showed her analyst license card, assuring him she wasn't like the others. She explained that Fuka's emblem was proof of being a tribe chief and was classified as an S-class treasure due to the difficulty acquiring it. Other hunters gathered around Fuku, expressing sympathy and asking him to let them seal the emblem, mentioning how incredibly lucky he was. Suddenly, the emblem began to glow and Fuku wondered what was happening to him. The scene shifted to a park where CG and two others were sitting. CG angrily kicked a trash bin over, wondering who that girl was to say such things to him in front of everyone. He couldn't contain his anger. CG decided to cause trouble for Ayas. He planned to call others or even attack her, hoping that if they recorded it, they could make good money from the scandal and maybe drag Fuku into it as well. He asked if that sounded funny to the others around him. Suddenly, a large horde of goblins invaded the city, attacking the people. Sirens blared, warning that numerous monsters had appeared in the city and instructing all citizens to evacuate to the nearest shelter immediately. Everyone was shocked that monsters had come so far and wondered if they had overflowed from the dungeon. The police helped people reach safety, but discovered that several adventurers had been abducted inside the dungeon. The goblins were carrying Seiji away, declaring that he would become the foundation of their prosperity. They took Seiji and two others deeper into the dungeon, where female goblins eagerly awaited, excited about the male humans. One goblin threw Seiji into the air, declaring that whoever caught him would get to keep him. All three captives were killed there. At that moment, Fuku saw the emblem glowing brightly. He sensed there was a commission outside. Suddenly, the gate opened and the god of luck appeared. She pointed at Fuku crying and begged him to return her skill to her. Fuku didn't understand what she was talking about. The god shook Fuku demanding that he return her skills. The others around them wondered who the child was, noting the strange horns on her head. Arya stepped between them and asked the god to calm down, saying this was no place for a child to come alone. The god shouted that she was indeed a god, causing the hunters to look at her suspiciously. It was the first time any of them had seen a deity in person. Ayas asked if this was the god they spoke of, the one who manages the dungeon. The god nodded and introduced herself as Alia, the goddess who grants salvation and blessings to the children of man. She then asked Alia to kneel. Ayas knelt respectfully and asked what the goddess wanted. Alia replied that Fuku had taken something very precious from her. Shocked, Ayas asked if this was true. Alia insisted that Fuku had taken it and pointed to him. Fuku, confused, wondered if Alia was referring to the curse known as Great Inversion. She confirmed this and asked him to return it. Fuku replied that even if he wanted to, he couldn't give it back to her. Annoyed, Alia snapped her fingers and said, "Let's just get over it." She then activated her divine gamble power, and suddenly both Fuku and Ace were transported to a strange place. Allah explained why they looked so surprised. She was the goddess of luck and gambling, and her divine gamble could turn all kinds of things, skills, stats, and more into objects of chance. She then demanded that Fuka return the Great Inversion skill. Suddenly, something burst from Fuka's head, causing him to cry out loudly. 2 hours passed, during which Aaliyah had lost all her clothes and Fuku apologized to her. Ayas tried to encourage Aaliyah, who seemed frustrated. Fuku closed his eyes and said that at the very least she should allow him to return the management of the dungeon. That, he said, would be an honor. Aaliyah asked for another bet, but Fuku said he had nothing left to wager. She smiled and said that even if they lost 100 times, they would surely win on the 101st try. I asked wonder if this was the effect of the great inversion, but thought that if it were, a goddess of luck wouldn't need to propose bets at all. She stepped in and grabbed Fuku's hand to check his stats. As she examined them, she was surprised to see an incredibly long number in his luck stat. Fuku remarked that it seemed when his luck was low, it affected those around him as well. Edis denied this, saying his luck was actually extremely high. She had never seen anything like it before. Fuku asked her not to joke, saying nothing good had ever happened in his entire life. He then recalled everything, being criticized just for being alive, his house burning down, and finally how his party members always treated him. Fuku stopped his train of thought, saying it might have been a mistake and that he averaged 9 accidents a year. Ayas joked, asking if he had a yearly accident pass. Aaliyah wondered if it was possible for someone to have such a low luck stat. She explained that the great inversion skill reversed everything, so his skill was actually at its maximum. Ayas finally understood how Fuku could have such extreme luck. Ili called it cheating and then asked for her clothes back. Fuku returned them and she got ready while remarking that it was a miracle he was still alive. She warned that if luck tipped too far in one direction, it could be deadly. Fuku shrugged, saying maybe he was just lucky. They all returned to the building and Ice informed them that the ownership of the skill currently resided with Fuku. Just then, they heard Seiji calling for Fuku, clearly out of his mind. He demanded to know how Fuku dared to do what he did, accusing him of using the clan chief's emblem against him. Fuku wondered about the emblem as CG pulled out a dagger. He sneered that a useless god of misfortune like Fuku should be grateful that CG used the emblem and even bothered to repair it. At best, Fuku could only stay still and serve as CG's power source. Seiji threw the dagger toward Fuku. Terrified, Fuku braced himself, but Aaliyah called him stupid. The dagger hit the emblem and its direction suddenly shifted toward a showcase hanging in the guild. The showcase then fell and landed on CG. Aaliyah told Fuku to look closely. That was the true power of luck. Aaliyah explained that bad luck attracts bad things and replenishes the good ones, while the opposite happens with good luck. If bad luck tries to launch malice against overwhelming good luck, it will be reflected, left aimless, and eventually return to its origin. She asked if Fuku was even listening, but they found him completely covered by a flock of birds, desperately asking for help. Once he was free, he mentioned that he thought they were going to give him some kind of celestial burial. Ayas said those were all blue birds. Ellie warned that Fuku was a dangerously unlucky monster, and if he accidentally dug into the ground or something, no one knows what he might uncover, like oil or buried gold. Ayas asked if all of this was happening because of that grand reversal skill. Aaliyah agreed and told Fuku to take good care of it. Fuku still didn't fully believe her, but then he felt warm and thanked her. She told him to just think of it as a blessing. Suddenly, a phone appeared next to Ayas and she answered, saying that Elia was right in front of her. Elia excitedly told Fuku that he was now her follower and had to worship and praise her. She welcomed him to her cult. Ellie called out to her, mentioning that there were many complaints in the guild regarding Ellie's gambling. Ella acted as if she didn't know anything, but Eyes dragged her along, saying that many adventurers had seen Ella force a disastrous skill on them to make them her followers and they wanted it reversed. Ayas shook Aaliyah and said it wasn't a blessing to use such a dangerous skill to recruit religious followers. Aaliyah replied that she promoted independence among her believers. Ayas pointed out that it sounded more like a threat. Aaliyah said she also had circumstances she couldn't avoid, then explained how a god's rank was decided by the number of followers. Gaining followers increased rank while losing them caused a decrease. If a god lost all faith, they would be stripped of their divinity. She revealed her rank was number 71, the second lowest among the gods. Ayas asked what would happen if Ela lost her divinity. Ela became flustered and said it out loud. Ela pulled her closer and Fuku begged her not to disappear, expressing his gratitude. Ayas hugged Aaliyah, assuring her that others would understand. They both decided to raise Aaliyah's prestige through their strength. Ayas added that even if it didn't seem so, she really had connections. They arrived at a temple that Ayas explained had appeared 3 years ago but had yet to be conquered. It was in a rank dungeon called the Great Iron Labyrinth. Fuku learned that the survival rate was only 30% and hunters rank C or higher had to accompany any team attempting it. Ayas replied to don't worry as she had a B rank hunter as well. Fuku felt uneasy, but Aaliyah told him that if he used his luck, things would be better for him. They urged him to keep moving and Aaliyah asked what he was doing just standing there. As they entered, 2 men were watching them from hiding. Fuku was surprised because this was completely different from the goblin cave they had encountered before. Ayas explained that these were the wall kings of the dungeon. He asked if they would be able to conquer it since no one had managed to do so in 3 years. Ela wondered what he thought dungeons were in the first place, explaining that they were places where gods gave trials and blessings to humans who had lost faith in them. They headed downstairs and AES agreed, adding that this was why there were so many dungeons in Japan. AES those humans were faithless heretics. AES added that since this was uncharted territory, any traps would have likely been disarmed already, but urged caution as they proceeded. AES thought there might not be many traps left. That's where luck would come into play, but warned not to open treasure chests at random. Suddenly, they saw Alea captured by a mimic monster. AES said mimics digest their victims down to the bone if they caught them. AES rushed to save her but was captured as well. Then they both called out to Fuku, asking him to save them. Fuku grabbed a sword and attacked the mimic, shouting for it to leave AES and Ayla alone. His leg slipped and he struck the box where the mimic was hiding. The box triggered a trap, and a barrage of arrows stabbed into it, killing the mimic. Ias and Ias were both sweating with relief, and Ias thanked Fuku for saving them. Ias confessed she was truly terrified. Fuku said the important thing was that they were all safe. He then examined the mimic's remains and found a key. Suddenly, a group of people arrived, saying it was worth following them. They captured Ias and demanded the key, threatening to hurt her if they didn't get it. At that moment, Fuku's hand began crackling with electricity. Pointing his hand at the attackers, he revealed the power of luck. A hole suddenly opened beneath the group. As they started to fall, Fuku grabbed Aya's hand to save her, promising he wouldn't let her go. Alea also helped pull Fuku back, declaring she wouldn't let them fall. But in the end, they all plunged down into the hole. Ayas, still injured, managed to get up and noticed Alea at a distance. She wondered where Fuku was. To her surprise, she found that she was sitting on top of him. Embarrassed, she quickly punched him and got up. Albert then asked if he could assess the situation, but before anything, Fuku needed medical attention. He insisted that he was fine, and Ayas acknowledged that. Alea commented that it seemed like they were ready to get back on their feet, and Fuku, still a bit confused, wondered about the others who had fallen with them. Ayas explained that they were all unconscious and had already been taken care of with first aid. Fuku remarked how unfortunate it was that they had been attacked by other adventurers. Ayas, however, replied that such things were common when treasure was involved. The group then looked at the key, wondering if it belonged to the treasure they were chasing. Ayas suggested it might open the treasure chamber. Alea, eager to move forward, said there was no time to waste and urged them to continue searching for the treasure. Ayas cautioned her to wait, warning that there could be traps ahead. But before Ayas could stop her, Alea stepped onto a trap, triggering a barrage of spears that flew toward her. As Ayas rushed to help, they heard a shout from Fuku, and a group of flying monsters appeared attacking them. In a panic, Fuku and Ayas grabbed Alea and fled, terrified of the monsters. Alea, now perched on Fuku's shoulder, couldn't help but reflect on how, despite being in danger, she always seemed to find herself in such situations during their adventures. Alea remarked that somehow they had managed to escape last time, but now they had to trust Fuku's luck. Ayas also grabbed his hand, saying it was for their safety. Fuku, confused, asked why the dungeons were so dangerous, commenting that it was a rare opportunity to ask a god. Alea, pleased to be recognized as someone important, smiled and explained that it was all about the trials and blessings. Since ancient times, gods had given trials to humans to help them survive and work with their blessings. She went on to say that while gods love humans, they sometimes punish them as well. Humans, in turn, learned to respect and thank the gods. However, over time, the faith was lost, which was why the gods created the dungeons to remind humans to remember their faith in the gods. She added that it wasn't a tragic story though, and she didn't want to forget it. As Fuku looked at her with a disappointed expression, Alea playfully tapped him on the head, telling him not to make that face and to focus on finding the treasure so they could leave. They then wonder how they would get out as it was starting to get dark ahead, and the place felt like a haunted house. Suddenly, Ayas hugged Fuku tightly, startled by the sound of a stone falling. She was scared and clung to him, her heart racing. Trembling, Alea reassured them that there wouldn't be any ghosts because this was the sacred dungeon. However, Ayas pointed out that Alea's face had turned very pale. Suddenly, they heard someone calling for help. Hala grabbed Fuku's neck tightly, and he winced, asking her to let go because it hurt. Ayas suggested that it might be another group of adventurers in trouble. They found a few people trapped in a prison, hanging there helplessly. Ayas was suspicious, wondering if it was a trap. The man in the prison, however, insisted that the god of the dungeon had done this to them. He explained that one of his comrades had gone to find the key, which Fuku had noticed was in the man's hand, similar to the one held by the earlier attackers. The man asked if everyone else was safe, and upon hearing that they hadn't been shown, urged them to leave and search for the others together. Just then, the god of the dungeon appeared, warning them that it would be a problem because these people were her followers. She introduced herself as the great goddess in charge of the Iron Labyrinth, the goddess of the path, Vaya, who was ranked 45th. Aaliyah, not impressed, called her useless and washed up. Vaya, in turn, criticized Aaliyah for daring to enter another god's dungeon. Aaliyah then demanded to know the reason behind trapping humans, insisting that it had nothing to do with the trials. Vaya responded that their actions were pointless and that what gods truly wanted was faith. She explained that she had bound the prisoners with chains, but had allowed some to escape to spread rumors. She gathered them in one place to concentrate on faith, as there was no shortage of people lured by the promise of treasure. She even told Ilya that she could copy her as she wished. Ilya was furious with Vaya's actions, but Vaya calmly replied that it worked well, using humans to force them into worship. She claimed they should be thankful for her methods. Vaya then revealed that the god of probability had defeated Ilya because Ilya only spoke sweet gentle words. The gods, however, valued systems and efficiency above all else. She dismissed Ilya's ideals as outdated and argued that someone who couldn't generate proper faith had no value. Fuku, recalling how he had been treated similarly in the past, stepped forward with a surge of power, telling Vaya that he understood much about fate and destiny. While Ilya might not have been most capable, Fuku warned Vaya not to mess with his goddess, Ilya. Enraged, Fuku stood his ground and Ilya quickly asked him to calm down. Vaya, undeterred, declared that it was her dungeon and with a wave of her hand summoned a massive monster. She announced that she would give the weak followers of Valyria a trial. The creature lunged toward Fuku, prepared to attack. The Minotaur loomed before them, radiating immense pressure. Arius realized that even a group of rank adventurers would struggle to defeat it. Despite Fuku's incredible luck, his opponent was extremely dangerous. Fuku could only hope to win by relying on his luck. There was no other way. The monster swung its weapon at him, but Fuku dodged easily. The Minotaur unleashed a barrage of blast attacks, striking several times, but Fuku kept dodging by running, thinking he had to leave everything to luck. He knew it was a two-option decision, either dodge or get hit. Villa watched intently, commenting that Fuku was an interesting case. His gear and body were weak, and he didn't seem to have any combat experience. Yet, she realized he was dodging purely by instinct. Another attack came at Fuku, but he dodged again and managed to grab an emblem. Vaya instructed the monster to attack more efficiently. A heavy strike was aimed at Fuku, and Alir shouted for him to run. Fuku noticed Vaya had altered the attack's trajectory. As the attack landed, Arius raised a defensive shield but couldn't fully block it, taking a hit on her hand. Vaya said that although Fuku should have been able to dodge the attack, he was simply unlucky with his opponent. Arius apologized, saying she wasn't strong enough to block it. Alira explained that Vaya was the god of the path. She guided the lost and protected the safety of travelers, leading everything to its final destination. Vaya added that her guided attacks always hit their target. The monster advanced toward them, and AES urged retreat, noting their compatibility was poor. Fuku stood up, asking Aliru to take care of Arius. As he released electricity, Arius asked what he was planning to do. He said he was going to fight and had already called for reinforcements. The monster launched a strong attack at Fuku again, but just then, goblins with shields appeared to block the strike. Ailey remembered the tribal chief emblem. Many goblins arrived to assist, and Vaya realized that Fuku could control low-level monsters. Suddenly, assassin goblins joined the fight to help Fuku and moved to attack Vaya, but her monster killed them effortlessly without her even moving. She commented that while using large numbers was a good idea, in an age of advanced military equipment, it was more efficient to improve individual performance. Vaya had made many modifications to her monster, creating numerous weak points across its body to attack. The goblins tried to protect Fuku, but they were all killed easily, including the one standing right in front of them. Villa declared her victory and proposed a deal. Fuku piqued her interest slightly, and she asked him to join her side. She explained it was called headhunting. It wouldn't erase what he had done. But from that moment on, he would have to worship her instead of Ilya. In return, she would use his help to advance further. She also promised to spare Ilya if he followed her. If he refused, she would kill all three of them. Fuku turned to Ilya, thanking her for showing him the light after being in darkness for 20 years. His luck was gradually becoming familiar to him, and he wondered if it could defeat the monster. He owed Ilya so much and asked if that power could really beat it. She guaranteed it and told him to go with confidence and crush the monster. He charged forward, and Vaya realized negotiations were over. Her monster attacked Fuku again, but this time he stopped the weapon with his own power, which left Vim momentarily confused. However, she quickly regained composure, knowing she had many other tricks. Fuku thought of the missiles and noticed a shield goblin still alive under his leg. Suddenly, all the monster's attacks were unleashed at once. Fuku jumped with a shield charge toward the monster. Vaya was shocked as Fuku dodged all the monster's attacks and closed in on her, finally grabbing her. She asked if he was attempting self-destruction. He guessed that's what it meant to bet everything on luck. Then a massive blast erupted. Vaya believed she was a goddess who watched over the journey and guided lost people. It seemed like a noble thought, but in reality she was nothing more than a useless person who could only give directions. Even that role was eventually replaced by machines, and she slowly stopped being needed. She didn't want to be forgotten, but efficiency was what people sought. She was lying down after Fuku's attack, and her monster had already been defeated by him. Fuku collapsed, but Aaliyah came to support him, saying that he had really done something incredible. He was so happy to have defeated that monster. She told him not to try to look cool because it was basically self-destructive. He couldn't think of anything else. Is also arrived and said that Fuku really had done it, then suggested they return to the building after some rest. Everyone was freed, but a man caught Vaya and was about to stab her with a sword. Fuka stopped him. The man was furious. They had been locked up for 3 weeks and would never have peace unless Vaya was killed. However, Fuka denied the request, and Villa recalled a time in the past when she helped a small child find his way after he got lost in the forest. How could they tell those men that such behavior was unacceptable? Now that everyone was safe, if Vaya ever did something like that again, Fuku would take care of her. She apologized deeply for her actions and cried a lot. Fuku told her it was alright and asked her not to do it again. Surprised by his kindness, she started crying even more. In the guild, people were celebrating because Fuku had cleared the labyrinth and also because Rand had risen in rank. He thanked everyone warmly. Alara asked why he seemed so distracted. After all, he was the star of the day and should have been happier. Rand explained it was because it was the first time someone outside his family had congratulated him. Ice brought a giant cake to celebrate. Fuku wanted to help lift it since Ice was injured, but she insisted she was fine. Suddenly, she felt a sharp pain, and the cake slipped, falling and somehow landing on Alia. Fuku quickly caught Ice before she fell and told her to be more careful because of her injury. They then examined the cake and noticed something with Alia. Fuku even pulled out a sword, and Ice explained that it was the guiding sword Ariadne, a rare loot from the Minotaur and a legendary item. Alia said it was a good apology gift, but mentioned that his clan leader's trial was even more impressive. Fuku wondered if he could ever compete with that. Alia got annoyed and said it was probably for the best that she wouldn't become his subordinate. A man wearing a mask approached and called out to Fuku, saying this was their first meeting. He then introduced himself as Tomonaga, the director of the guild. Ayes bowed respectfully and the other adventurers followed suit. Fuku was surprised to see their reactions. Tomonaga explained that energy was the most important thing for them all, then examined Fuku's hand, praising him not only for conquering the difficult dungeon, but also for rescuing the hostages. Fuku wondered why someone like Tomonaga was here. Tomonaga handed Fuku a new guild card that looked very premium. He said the card was still ranked E, but the rules were different, and a rank C would be fine. Before leaving, he expressed his appreciation to Fuku and encouraged him to keep leveling up. Fuku bowed in thanks, showing his respect. Some adventurers dressed in gold armor approached Fuku, saying it was incredible that he had conquered an unexplored dungeon in just one day. They wondered if it was also thanks to the blessing of the god of luck. Ayas agreed, mentioning that escaping the explosion with only minor injuries was all thanks to Elia. In a slow voice, she told Elia that this was her chance to gain many followers. Elia was eating cake and told everyone that with the power of her luck, she would save everyone no matter how strong the enemy was. Everyone cheered and enjoyed their drinks. One man in gold armor told Fuku he wanted his help with something and said that both he and his goddess would be pleased if Fuku's name spread. They began to take Fuku away, and Ayas wondered where they were going. As people praised her, she said it was all thanks to Fuku and that it wasn't much of a gift, but she could turn him into her servant. Then she noticed Fuku wasn't around. Ayas told her that Fuku had gone off somewhere with the guys in armor, and she thought it had something to do with helping someone. When Fuku went to help, he discovered the item, and a lady told him it hadn't been found in the last 220 years. Everyone was overjoyed because Fuku had found it in just 5 minutes. The lady offered him some money as a token of gratitude, but Fuku insisted there was no need to thank him. A bald man in gold armor told Fuku not to be shy, saying that accepting such rewards was part of good manners. They took a small portion of the commission and gave the rest, a huge sum, to Fuku. His hands trembled as he tried to refuse the money. The man named Kawada was a believer in Mercator, the god of money. He told Fuku they wanted to reward him properly. Meanwhile, Yamada and Yoshida talked about how gratitude was natural in the world and that it was okay to accept such a large sum. Fuku only knew how to earn rewards through guild missions, so this was new to him. They mentioned they were believers in the god of money and had a real knack for sensing opportunities like this. They asked Fuku to help them the next day, promising they would win big together. Aaliyah and Ayas were watching everything while hiding behind the bushes. Ayas asked Aaliyah if it was really okay not to tell Fuku anything. Alia replied that she didn't care. People would get the contract and many more things in the coming days and early on so much money. Yamada and Yoshida wondered aloud where they would spend all that money. Kawada handed over Fuku's share to him and even added a bonus. They also offered to pick him up and drop him off if he wanted, but Fuku declined, saying he was learning how to win on his own. Is and Ayla continued following him, and Ayla mentioned once again that Fuku was her servant. Yamada told Fuku that to make money, he needed experience, and next time, they could go to the casino to train him. Suddenly, a girl approached them holding a flyer. She said it promised that they could find anything and asked if they could help find Mary, her kitten who had disappeared 3 days ago. Kawada asked how much she would pay for the service. The girl said she had no money. Fuka said it was fine to help her and that money wasn't necessary. But Kawada insisted they wouldn't help without payment. Still, the girl looked at Fuka with trust and begged him to find Mary. Yamada pulled her aside and told her not to be spoiled. This was their job, and if she couldn't pay, she should go back home. Meanwhile, Yoshida was taking Fuku away to celebrate. They were taking Fuku away when Alia grew angry at how cruel they were being. Just then, Aya suddenly stood up, and Alia asked why she got up so abruptly. Aya stepped out, and Alia warned that those people might have seen her. Fuku heard Aya's voice and asked how he could help her. She suddenly threw him away with surprising strength, and the other two men wondered what was wrong with her and why she was crouching like that. They said putting a price even on kindness was cruel and they should be ashamed of themselves. Kawada stood up, furious, and asked if she was planning to fight the believers of the god of money. Fuku acted differently this time. He intended to return all the money to Kawada, but Kawada, pretending to be kind, asked what he was thinking after all they had done for him. Fuku replied firmly that he wouldn't sell his heart. Then he approached Ayas, apologized, and she reassured him she wasn't worried because she knew he wouldn't change and trusted him. Feeling shy, Fuku asked the girl to come along to find Mary. The girl happily took Ayas with her as well. Kawada grew even angrier and drew his sword along with the others ready to fight Fuku. He warned that this wasn't the right way to go about things, claiming they had found a good gold mine. He accused the servant of some second-rate goddess of showing off too much and threatened to report everything to Mercator. Just then, a giant cat appeared behind Fuku and asked what Kawada would do next. Kawada saw the cat and realized it was Mercator, the god of money. Fuku wondered if that huge cat really was Mercator. Kawada said those men were interfering in their business and asked Mercator to use his power to teach them a lesson. Mercator struck Kawada hard, slamming him into the ground, and scolded him for being so rude. Then the three men quickly ran away. The girl hugged Mercator tightly, calling him Mary and saying she had been so worried about him. Fuku and Ise were surprised to hear that. Mercator told them those men caused trouble, and Ise bowed to apologize for raising a hand against them. Mercator said it was a good lesson for those three. Fuku admitted that Mercator really impressed him. Mercator replied that if he was truly impressed, he would like to make a servant like Fuku a real man. But he had to leave because a woman was jealous and he wouldn't dare stay to greet them. Mercator said goodbye and promised they would meet again soon. They didn't quite understand, but Mercator explained it was an emergency summons straight from Tamanaga. At the meeting, every god along with their servants came to me. He thanked Tommy and Tomu for coming and wanted to ask them something about conquering a dungeon. Then Tommy showed them the concrete jungle, which was currently one of the largest dungeons in the country. Someone mentioned that its estimated size was 11 square kilometers. Tommy denied this, explaining that the data was from last week. Currently, it had expanded to approximately 34 square kilometers and was still rapidly growing. If left unchecked, the entire Japanese archipelago would be consumed by it within just 3 months. That was why they needed everyone's help, especially those with dungeon conquest experience. He thanked them all as they accepted the request. The scene then shifted to Arjel, the goddess of fertility and administrator of the concrete jungle. Ali told Arjel that Tommy looked pale as a ghost. Arjel asked if it was really that serious, saying she was only creating a new dungeon and watering the plants as it grew so quickly. Ali shouted that it was Arjel's fault and playfully hit her on the head. Fuku said it was fine, while Mercator added that they couldn't change what was already done. A man's time was neither in the past nor the future, but in the present. Alia then remarked that Arjel wasn't a man. AS said they could do something about the original tree, so everything would be fine. She wondered if the guild's plan would really work. And if it didn't, they would all be in trouble. IS then explained the entire plan. Mercator asked Alia if she was coming with them as well. She refused, reminding everyone of her condition during the bet with Fuku. Since she lost, she owed him and had to stay with him. Mercator said they would take care of things and that she might not know what could happen. He also wondered why they always caused scandals. With the help of a sword, Fuku used a guide skill to show them the way through the dungeon, and Mercator was amazed by its power. Iyas explained that it was a divine weapon, and as long as they followed it, they wouldn't face any major danger. Fuku led the way, while Aiz and Ela were both tired. Aiz commented that the terrain was rough and hard to advance through, and it didn't seem like there were any monsters. Aiz agreed, noting that they hadn't seen any either. Suddenly, Fuku noticed something and wondered what it was. Aiz said it might be his imagination. What they hadn't noticed was that Aiz was already being pulled away by a whip. As Fuka relaxed, Aiz was taken as well. Suddenly, something came to grab Fuka's leg, and they realized it was the tree spirit's vine. Alia wondered why things like this always happened to her. Aiz rushed to help and fired her electric gun at the whip, which shocked Alia as well, but she managed to break free. After that, Fuku and Aiz escaped from the tree spirit too. Aiz apologized, saying it seemed her electric gun didn't work on the vine but did affect Alia. Fuku attacked the giant tree spirit, landing a critical hit of 82 and killing it. He said it was all or nothing and was glad his sword worked so well. Eos wondered why a normally peaceful tree would behave like that. She then found a power nut. As Fuku happily reached for it, Alia warned that it was pointless for him to eat it, because using his skill would make him lose strength. When Fuku asked, I asked to eat it instead, she refused, saying it was too valuable and rare, worth about 500,000 yen on the market. Fuku replied that it was fine as she ate it because it would be a waste otherwise. Besides, she had really helped him and he was giving it as a gift to an important companion. Alia then headed ahead, telling them to follow her. Ayas was reminded of her past in a dungeon, where she had once run to a group, telling them that another group was under attack by monsters and that they needed to help. However, the girls had refused, not wanting to risk themselves, and told Ayas that if the other group was wiped out, the loot would be theirs for the taking. One of them even referred to it as opportunistic gain. Ayas kept insisting they go to help, but their leader slammed her hand on the table, expressing how annoying Ayas' sense of justice was. She told Ayas that if she was so eager to help, she should go alone, adding that Ayas was too weak to make a difference anyway. Ayas stopped arguing, her thoughts drifting to Fuku. She remembered how he had always helped her, and compared to him, she felt utterly useless. She silently ate the nut, and Fuku called out, urging her to hurry up. Meanwhile, Kawada and two others were sneaking up behind Ayas, planning to take credit for her actions. If they could receive the Mercator's blessing, they believed they would become even richer than they already were. Fuku, leading the way with his sword, remained unaware of their plotting. The nut inside Ias began to glow. Suddenly, the floor began shaking and a giant monster appeared behind them, ready to attack. Alia wondered what kind of monster it was and Ias was unsure, having never seen anything like it before. Fuku, however, dismissed it as irrelevant and quickly fired a shot aimed at the creature. But it was so close. Ice then realized that it wasn't a monster at all. It was a massive black rat. Both Fuku and Alia were shocked, never having imagined such a giant rat could exist. Iya speculated that the dungeon might have somehow affected the creatures inside, turning them more aggressive. She had never heard of such a phenomenon before. Fuku pondered if the usually calm forest spirits were also being influenced and guessed that other species might be becoming aggressive one by one. Alia was increasingly worried, fearing that the dungeon was affecting the entire ecosystem. Fuku then turned to Ayast, asking her what was wrong. She replied that it was nothing, and they continued on their way. Meanwhile, Kawada and the others were lounging on a branch, casually watching the scene. They joked about letting the monsters deal with themselves, claiming it was an easy fight for them. After a while, they reached the source of the dungeon. Fuku remarked that it was much larger than they had anticipated. He knew that it wasn't just water fueling its growth, and the cause of everything was linked to Adol. But now we need to face it and finish this, he said, determined to complete their mission. Hayas was equipped with a weapon called Sabukaruru. Just then, Fuku warned that their situation wasn't going to be easy. Waves of rats were attacking them, and they all wondered what they would do about it. At that moment, Kawada and the other two appeared, thanking them for guiding the way. They mentioned that the juicy part was now theirs and that they'd simply take the same route and do whatever it took to claim the dungeon rewards. Alia, enraged by their selfishness, could hardly believe what he was hearing. Yamada, nonchalantly drilling into a tree, responded the one who plays smart was the one who's right. Suddenly, the entire area turned blood red, and a deep heavy sound wave reverberated, leaving everyone feeling disoriented. Ayas realized that the sprout was threatening them. The rats were becoming increasingly dangerous, and Kawada quickly understood that they were in even more danger now. The rats began attacking with some of them heading straight toward Alia. Terrified, Alia froze, but Fusion knew there wasn't enough time to save him. Just as the rats were about to strike, Ice transformed in an unexpected way. Her hair grew long, and she used it to crush the attacking rat beneath it. As more rats charged toward her, she swiftly sliced through them with ease, eliminating them one by one. Alia, stunned, wondered aloud, what's happening to Ayas? Ayas slammed the ground with such force that it cracked beneath her. Kawada, amazed, commented on her power and wondered what kind of skill she was using. Ayas, laughing manically, continued to attack. Fuku turned to Elia and said, Ayas has completely lost her mind. Ayas, thinking for a moment, replied, it's probably the sprout, and then gestured toward Ayas' chest, where the same mark from the forest spirit and the rats was visible. They both realized that the seed Ayas had eaten earlier might be controlling both her body and mind. They were in serious trouble now. Although they knew the seed was the weak point, they couldn't attack Ayas directly, as doing so would likely kill her. Fuku felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. It was his fault for giving her the seed in the first place, and now he had to find a way to fix this. Turning to Elia, he asked for a favor, something that could help him stand against Ayas. She never believed in luck, but she was always there to reach out to me. You have to save her no matter what. Please help him do this. Elia, understanding the gravity of the situation, snapped into action and decided to use the divine gamble. He initiated the fair and partial gamble, with the stakes being control of Ayasa's body. The two players were Fuku and the seed inside Ayasa's body. By making that gamble, Elia asked Fuku if he was truly certain it would work. Fuku nodded in agreement, thanking her. He believed that the seed was paralyzing Ayas, and if they attacked recklessly, Ayas would be unable to escape. On the other hand, if they allowed the seed to attack them, luck would put Ayas in danger. Ayla, however, stood firm, stating that their opponent was not the type to sit idly by and play games. Fuku knew that he had to act, and Ayla didn't want to know what would happen next. She announced that it would be a duel, with the wager being control over each other's body. In other words, the winner would take full control. Ayas laughed upon hearing this, and Fuku prepared to attack with his sword, thinking that they could bet on anything. But the outcome of the bet was absolute. He threw the sword, aiming for Ayas' hand, and managed to tear through the armor. Fuku reminded everyone that they had bet their bodies against each other, and no wager could exist without a valid risk. Elia, still in disbelief, wondered how Fuku could risk his life on such a plan, one that could leave him controlled by Ayas instead. Fuku responded calmly, saying it was fine because that was his weapon. As they spoke, they noticed the seed regenerating Ayas' hand, and Ayas, slightly conscious, pointed toward a chemical spreading in the air. Fuku understood, and without hesitation, took the sword, asking only to be guided. With a swift throw, the sword struck Ayas, shattering the chemical barrier and causing the seed to emerge. However, Ayas did not want the seed to be released. A massive explosion followed, but to Fuku's relief, Ayas was unharmed. He embraced her, thanking God for her safety. She apologized, saying that once again, she had gotten in the way. Even though they were teammates, she always seemed to cause him trouble. Fuku reassured her, saying it was fine to cause trouble and that their relationship was not one-sided. They both bore the cost for each other, but they also supported one another. He told her that he wanted to be that kind of teammate. Both of them grew emotional, and Ayas reflected on whether she had misunderstood things. She questioned why she hadn't seen this perspective before. Fuku smiled softly, and Elia responded, stating that she wouldn't be confused anymore. For a goddess, an explosion was hardly something to fear. When they asked if she was truly frightened, Elia quietly confessed she thought she was going to die. Fuka and Ayas both noted how faint her voice was, and Fuka silently thought that they should continue to cause trouble for each other and support each other even more because they were teammates. As they celebrated in the guild, Mercator scolded Kawada, saying that his body had caused trouble for them. Kawada quickly apologized. Fuku noticed Kawada's face and remarked that he had gone too far. Mercator, in turn, acknowledged that he owed them again and offered them money whenever they needed it. Fuku agreed to the offer. Just then, Tommy and the others arrived, and in a burst of excitement, tossed Fuku into the air to congratulate him for conquering the concrete forest and ranking up. As he began to fall, Ardell caught him, saying that no amount of thanks would ever be enough. Fuku's face ended up pressed against her chest, and she hugged him tighter, but Elia immediately pulled him away. Ardell refused to let go of Fuku, insisting that he would become her familiar. Elia, not having any of it, replied firmly, saying Fuku would be free, and that Ardell already had tons of familiars. Tomei interrupted the situation with an apology and asked Fuku and Elia to come with him for a while, as the chief of the gods had called for them. Elia's face went pale of the mention of the chief of the gods, and Ys noticed that it wasn't just pale, it was turning purple. Elia nervously wondered whether the meeting with the chief of the gods was a good thing. When they arrived in front of the chief of the gods' room, Villa showed up, asking if they had been called as well. Vaya was shocked to see Vaya there too. Vaya quickly reassured them, saying she wasn't there to fight with Elia. She explained that Ardell had probably been called because of their success in conquering the dungeon, and there might be a reward in store for them. Aya spoke up, saying she wouldn't associate with that group, but they all entered the room anyway. Inside, the chief of the gods greeted them, noting that it had been a long time since she had met the problematic gods, and announced that they were all sentenced to death. Ardell and Viage didn't react, but Ali began crying loudly. The chief of the gods then explained the crimes of the three of them, stating that they could no longer be overlooked and that they would face severe punishment. Arya spoke up, arguing that sentencing them to death was too extreme. Elia agreed with her, but Fuku, who had been silent until then, asked everyone to be quiet. He pleaded with the chief of the gods, lowering Elia's head in the process. He told the chief that punishing them for their actions was unforgivable, but they would make amends provided they were allowed to live. The chief of the gods replied that there was no other choice and that they would be forgiven this time, allowing them to live. As they continued discussing their fate, Elia remarked that the chief was unusually polite toward humans, to which Vaya responded, saying it might have been her doing since they were the ones who brought up the matter. The chief of the gods added that there could be no consequences left unchecked. As their punishment, they were tasked with delivering a telegram to her sister, who lived on an uninhabited island in the south. She handed the letter to Elia, telling them to deliver it and that she was counting on them. The group then boarded a ship to the island, feeling a sense of relief. Ayla remarked that what had started as a sentence from the chief of the gods had somehow turned into a vacation. Ayas also found the situation quite convenient. Suddenly, Argo grabbed Ayla's chest and with a mischievous grin suggested, "Let's enjoy this." Fuku was reminded of the time when the chief of the gods had touched his face, remarking that he had grown a lot. Fuku wondered what she meant by that. Meanwhile, Vaya was sailing the ship and announced that they had arrived at Shishigami Island. As they reached the shore, everyone disembarked in their swimsuits. A large group of men appeared as well, and Fuka realized they were followers of Vaya, all crammed into the command room. Fuka was surprised by how many people filled the room. Hayas asked Fuku about the chief's younger sister, and Fuku suggested they deliver the letter first. Elia and Arjul were already playing in the sea, and Elia remarked that there was no deadline for delivering the letter. Arjul added that Morse, the chief's sister, was probably napping since she was the goddess of night and only woke at night. Alia then took bars to catch some octopuses. Fuku felt uneasy because what was supposed to be her punishment had turned into a playful trip. Vaya, noticing his discomfort, told him to give up. Once they were like this, there was no stopping them until they grew tired. She was enjoying herself as well. Fuku, feeling a bit out of place, noticed her enjoying the time by the beach. Vaya smiled at him, suggesting he should have fun too since they were stranded until nightfall. However, was terrible at swimming. Vaya asked Fuku to become her follower, explaining that it was a form of recruitment. Fuku, confused, replied that he didn't understand what she meant. Vaya then clarified, saying it was like a free contract, unlike familiars which were bound by an exclusive contract and known as the myth of the sacred marriage. She revealed that there were many stories of gods and humans joining together in this way. Argo had many familiars in her service, while Vaya, in contrast, hardly had any believers. She explained that her position would soon drop significantly and the sea couldn't afford to worry about appearances anymore. Fuku was about to touch her ears when Arya suddenly called for his help, saying the octopus was pulling at her dress. Aliyah was trying to pull it off, but the clothes were slipping off. Fukar immediately went to help them both and told Vaya to continue her explanation later. As night fell, they gathered around a bonfire, having had fun throughout the day. Elia, feeling tired, mentioned that it was about time they delivered the letter to Morse. Arya suddenly sensed something moving in the forest behind them. As she turned, Fuku asked if there was something there. Aryas replied that she felt something moving. Elia then aimed the light from her torch at Aryas' face from below and teasingly asked if she thought it was a ghost. Aryas, frightened, hugged Fuku tightly, her face pressed against his chest. She pleaded, "Don't scare her like that." Fuku, trying to comfort her, whispered she might be going to die. Vaya pointed the torch toward the forest, saying it was a remote area and probably just a wild boar or something similar. But then to their shock, they saw several ghosts. Fuku and the others screamed and immediately ran away in fear. Iyas wondered aloud if it might be Morse. Ayla quickly denied it, saying that couldn't be the case. Villa added that if they didn't get back to the ship soon, they'd be in serious trouble. When they reached the shore, they saw their ship being destroyed by a giant monster. With no way to escape, panic set in. Then someone voiced the question on everyone's mind, that was the island actually a dungeon? They were shocked, and Ayla wondered what they should do as they wouldn't be able to stay on the island now. Vaya asked her not to cry at her age and that she always acted the same way. A joker approached Diaz to scare her, and even Ayla was startled by it. The joker chased after both of them with Vaya flying alongside them. These were familiars of Arjul, who asked how they should proceed, leaving it to them. Alia then tapped into the power of the divinity of fertility, proclaiming it and receiving the divine grace known as Nobunobiru. It was said to be Arjul's most powerful protection, capable of making all creation grow. Afterward, they fought other ghosts. Once the battle was over, they began running away from the ghosts hiding behind the bushes. Alia noted that somehow they had managed to shake off their pursuers, but then she wondered how she could leave her familiars behind. Arjul had trusted them after all. Alia stated that they were the only ones left and began analyzing the situation. Vaya explained that the entire island seemed like a dungeon, a nightmare. The creatures there could sense the fear of their prey, and it appeared to be a monster that absorbed fear to grow stronger. As Fuku suggested they escaped somehow, Vaya replied that it was impossible to leave as there were sharks in the water. Fuku asked if competing was the only option. Vaya agreed, and Alir explained that the dungeon was designed to test both humans and gods. The chief of the gods had sent them there with that intention. She noticed that everyone seemed terrified of something, urging Alir to just watch her back. She responded that she wouldn't fall for their tricks, but before she could act, a ghost captured her and flew off. Ayas wondered how they were supposed to follow it. Fuku asked Vaya and Arjul to fly and follow the ghost. Arjul agreed, but only if Fuku accepted to become her familiar. Vaya then told Fuku that she would help first. Just then, a shining stone flew toward Fuku. As he reached for it, another monster appeared, intending to devour him, but it stopped when Fuku knelt to pick up the stone. Terrified, Villa urged him to run. However, his legs wouldn't move. Suddenly, a seed appeared on Ayas' chest, and as the monster lunged to attack, Ayas used her power to pull Fuku away from the creature. The monsters began chasing them, and Fuku wondered about the power Ayas had used. She explained it was from their last dungeon conquest when they explored together. Ayas reminded him that it had been a mistake, but its form still haunted her. As she thought about saving him, the veins began to spread on their own. She apologized, saying she hadn't expected it. But she couldn't believe that the power from the seed was still affecting her. Vaya and Argo were together, and they wondered why no sounds were coming from monsters. Had they finally given up? Argyle remarked that the situation felt like being at an amusement park, while Vaya cautioned that they needed to be more careful about the dangers around them. She also reminded Argyle that their abilities weren't suited for combat. She wondered if Fuku would be there to help. Argyle pointed out that Vaya really cared about Fuku. Vaya responded, slightly defensive, that she had invited Fuku to become her familiar, but that didn't mean she had any special attachment. She went on to say that no matter how much someone's birth luck varied, it was nearly impossible for a human to be born with such exceptional steps naturally. It was pollutedly impossible. Ardwell asked why Fuku was so lucky. She speculated that perhaps someone had manipulated his circumstances, and she mentioned that she had looked into his past and found something intriguing. It became clear to her when she heard his surname, Kanzuki. Just then, they heard a voice saying, it really was interesting. A lady stood near Vaya, and suddenly, she flew up into the sky. She was the god of night, Morse. Vaya asked Morse to take a look at Fuku, who was indeed very intriguing. Morse responded with a smirk, claiming she was far more interesting than any of them. She demanded they fight now, summoning ghosts to capture them. She then questioned why her older sister had sent Fuku to her island, revealing that Fuku was somehow connected to her older sister, the being who had killed Haru rank 1. Vaya was shocked and asked if Fuku had killed the family anima, the chief. Morse confirmed this and explained that in a letter from her older brother, Fuku had been welcomed with the utmost hospitality. Anima, however, never took lives as she was the goddess of life. Morse believed that one day she would have to make a decision, and for 20 years she had been waiting for that day to arrive. Vaya and the others then asked what Morse was planning to do with Fuku. Morse replied coldly that she would do what needed to be done as she was the god of death. Vaya mentioned how a god killing someone over a personal grudge was troubling. Morse responded that the chief had wanted the same thing as well. Vaya noted that the situation was a bit problematic and then attempted to attack using her gun and guiding her aim. But Morse swiftly stabbed her in the chest with her scythe, warning her not to interfere with her work. Vaya fell to the ground, and as Argo called her name, Morse added that her divine abilities were troublesome and that they would remain there, immobilized. Meanwhile, Fuku was with Ayas and felt something was wrong. He apologized, saying he had been startled by the song of the birds. Ayas explained that it was because there were so many of them. They both wondered if there was any safe place on the island, a concrete jungle, or perhaps a supply point where they could take refuge. Ayas revealed that everything had been orchestrated by the guild staff, but the details of the island were not even in the guild's database. It was only known as the Dark Dungeon, and there would be no safe zones to rely on. Fuku pointed out that there hadn't been any issues during the day, so they understood that everything had been activated at night. He suggested they wait until morning. Noticing that hours had passed since they were separated from the others, Ayas realized the moon had already begun to set. Normally, it would take about 2 more hours for the moon to fully set. She was surprised and then remarked that if this truly was a dungeon, it could work to their advantage. If they weren't afraid, even the night terrors wouldn't pose a threat. Suddenly, Alir appeared and put a hand on Ayas' shoulder, scaring her so much that she fainted. Alir, irritated, told her not to faint just from seeing her face, saying it was really rude of Ayas. Arjul and Villa soon arrived as well. Ayas just stared at Alir, still recovering. Villa then shared the good news. They had found a boat at the northern cove. She suggested they escape quickly before the situation worsened. They began to follow Alir in order to escape the island. As they walked, Aiz remarked that it felt much more reassuring with more people around. They weren't injured, and everyone was fine. He then asked how far the cove was. They were moving farther from the sea, and Via responded that this path was safer. She snapped at them to be quiet and just follow her. Fuku wondered if he had made her mad, but just then, he noticed that his leg was on Argel's familiar. At first, he thought it was one of the night terrors, but then he realized what it truly was. Fuku and Aiz decided to help him. Aiz went to search for some healing herbs. The man spoke up, saying that their first priority should be escaping with Argel's Nobinobi. He pointed toward Argel, explaining that she wasn't the real one. Her horns were facing outward. The being taking Argel's form then revealed itself, commenting that familiars were a pain, and that's why she had warned them to be cautious. She shifted into her true form, a night terror. Aiz also felt something different. Her seed began to shine, and she started sweating profusely. Suddenly, Morse appeared and stabbed Aiz with a scythe, attempting to take her away. Aiz, with tears in her eyes, called out for Fuku. Morse coldly told Aiz to accept her fate before using astral projection to extract Aiz's soul and throwing her away. Fuku rushed to catch her, shouting for her to wake up. With trembling hands, Aiz managed to touch his face, but her breath stopped there. Morse turned to Fuku and said that if he wanted to get the others back, he would need to meet her at the center of the island. She added with a cold smile, "It's the same thing he did to his mother, Oriko." The scene reminded Fuku of 20 years ago when a massive monster outbreak emerged from the dungeon. Adventurers fought fiercely to stop the monsters from entering the urban areas, but destruction spread everywhere. Fuku, as a baby, was in his mother's arms, crying. She comforted him, telling him that he would be fine and that she would surely protect him, even if it cost her life. Just then, a monster appeared, stabbing her to kill. Morse interrupted Fuku's thoughts, telling him that if he wanted to settle things with the past, would return the lives of his comrades. She would be waiting for him. Fuku, overcome with guilt, admitted that it was all his fault. Because of him, he lost his mother, Aiz, and everyone else. He began to cry, saying that he couldn't go on like this anymore. Suddenly, he heard Aiz's voice, telling him that it wasn't like that. No matter what had happened in the past, he was now someone who could save many people. Fuku wondered where the voice was coming from, and then he noticed a small ghost-like figure behind him. He asked if it was really Aiz, and she confirmed it. Fuku mentioned that she hadn't looked like this a moment ago, and Aiz explained that it was something like astral projection or something similar. He reached out to touch her, moving closer to Misha's body, telling Aiz to go back. Aiz, however, felt pain and slapped him, her frustration clear. Fuku sat down, speaking about his mother and the story his uncle had told him, that his mother had died protecting him. Aiz added that this made it even more important for him to live. She urged him to keep moving forward, saying that no matter what had happened in the past, it shouldn't affect the future. She suggested that they give Morse a real surprise. They both left from there, but Alia, Villa, and Argel were not happy with this. Allah and Argel pushed Via to get into her body. Morse coldly stated that such an action was useless. The soul had been separated by soul extraction, and no one else could rewrite it but her. Allah responded, telling Morse that just because things were going her way, it didn't mean she should get ahead of herself. Via then asked if they were being made this way just for Fuku to offer his own life. Alia replied that it meant Morse couldn't defeat Fuku in a direct fight. Via stated firmly that Fuku was not someone a cowardly trick like that would work on. Alia added that he had been completely fooled as well. Morse, with a cold smile, said that if she could avenge the frustration of her sister, any method would suffice. Just then, Fuku arrived, and Morse asked if he was ready to sacrifice his life for his comrades. The three were now captured by Morse, and she told Fuku that she had already given him enough time. She didn't want to hear any foolish answers. Fuku replied that when he was alive, he brought misery to those around him, but things were different now. He would live to protect and save everyone. Morse grew angered, feeling that he was acting tough. She thought there was no need for restraint as she could see his skills and the countermeasures against the malice that repelled all ill intentions. Everything was perfect. She made Ilya get closer to Fuku, and both were captured by her power. Morse considered if her malice could force him into a situation where he had no choice but to accept it. She rushed forward, stabbing her scythe into Ilya, which then continued to stab Fuku. Morse smiled with satisfaction as she did this. She still referred to Fuku as the killer of her sister's familiar using astral projection and soul extraction. As she did, felt the bond between Fuku and the chief of gods. She remembered Fuku's mother showing him to the chief, telling him she entrusted her small child to the chief and left the world. The chief, in turn, revived Fuku, saying it was the last wish of his mother. The chief spoke, telling Fuku that from then on, those he trusted would be equally protected and bound his life to that of his comrades. He would take the burden of pain and misfortune, a cruel fate left to him by Ariko, and this was her first and last wish for him. Morse stopped reminiscing as she felt the weight of the scythe growing unbearable. It felt as if it was no longer moving, and the soul was now bound to the body in a way that felt entirely different. Fuku suddenly woke, feeling as if his power was fading. His power surged, making Morse fall, and he struck her with the pole, sending it toward her. She screamed in pain as the blow hit. The scene recalls a time in the past when two goddess sisters lived together, deeply loving and caring for each other. But one day, the older sister brought home a human familiar. The younger sister became jealous, feeling as though her sister had been taken away by this human. Not long after, a tragic accident occurred involving the humans, and the older sister's familiar died. The younger sister felt responsible for the loss, blaming herself because she was the goddess of death. Overwhelmed by guilt, she left, but the seed of jealousy had already begun to grow in her heart. Her resentment deepened toward the human who had monopolized her sister's affection. That bitterness turned cruel, and she sought ways to make her sister suffer. Eventually, she learned about Fuku, the one her sister was now protecting. Realizing that Fuku had a connection to the death of the familiar, she came to believe that if the child died, her sister might find peace. From that moment, she began to plot her revenge. The story returns to the present. A rock was about to fall on Morse, but Fuku and Shivan saved him just in time. That's why he saved her in return. He told her not to misunderstand. Just because he did something kind doesn't mean he had forgiven her for everything she had done. But because things hadn't yet settled properly between her and her older sister, he would choose to forgive her. He too understood the painful loneliness of being unable to see one's sister again. The scene shifts to the Divine Boss's room, where everyone has gathered to meet the chief. She wonders how things turned out this way. Aaliyah steps forward, knowing that the chief was responsible for it all, and everyone has had a terrible time because of it. The chief admits that she only asked her sister to treat Fuku with hospitality, and Fuku had seen it, even noting that it was meant to be a grand gesture. Aaliyah, frustrated, exclaims that this whole situation was completely misunderstood, and she should have used an email, but Villa suggests using Lime instead. As the chief floats in the sky, Aaliyah gets close to her, but suddenly she falls, causing the chief to ask if her sister was all right and whether she was surprised by the sudden visit. Fuku then reassures Morse, saying it would have been better if she had approached things directly. Morse apologizes to her sister for being jealous of them, and Oriko even tries to befriend Morse. However, Morse remains distant, still overwhelmed by jealousy, and apologizes for the hurt she caused Oriko's child. She admits that what she did was unforgivable, which was why she couldn't stay with her sister. Just then, the chief hugs Morse and they both fall. The chief softly tells her that it's her own fault, not Morse's, and welcomes her back. She acknowledges that coming back might be frightening for Morse, but she was here for her regardless. Ayas was overjoyed, but Villa wondered how inefficient everything had been. Fuku noticed that Aaliyah and Villa were arguing with each other. He observed the wounds on everyone's faces and began to wonder if he should use his skills more effectively. The chief approached Fuka, bowing her head again to apologize for causing him trouble. Fuka reassured her that it was fine and asked her to raise her head. The chief explained that they had completed a high-difficulty dungeon that wasn't even registered with the guild, and she promised them a boon in place of her sister. She then asked them to make a wish. Just as Aaliyah was about to speak, Vaya stopped her. Fuku, however, asked about his mother, as he didn't know much about her. The only things he had were a funeral portrait and an album, both of which were destroyed in a fire, which was why he wanted to learn more. He also asked why the chief had made her his familiar. The chief then began to tell the story. Oroko Tobo was the greatest adventurer since the two goddesses began the trials. Oroko had been kind to everyone and was loved by many people, including the gods. She rose to the position of assistant director of the guild at a young age. Though she was highly talented, that alone wouldn't have been enough for her to be chosen as the chief's familiar. Orika was more human than others and treated the chief with kindness and without discrimination, even when the chief was all alone. The familiar bond was the greatest grace a god could grant to the one they loved most. Fuku looked around at the other gods, and Alea remarked that there were many kinds of love. Arjul then asked Fuku to become her familiar. This sparked anger in Vaya, who scolded Arjul for saying such unnecessary things. The chief, noticing the tension, told Fuku that he might be able to recover the album, as recently, a dungeon had been created that stored all the things lost or damaged, including books. It was called Infinity Horfma, Library 8. In the dungeon, a god was speaking to a child, saying that Morse might still be of use, but she had turned out to be more useless than expected. The god then asked the boy if he understood what he needed to do, as he didn't want to lose his divinity. The search team from Dungeon Scorching Valley Area C, which was surrounded by intense heat and lava, reported sighting a figure resembling the target subject. This sighting was later confirmed, and they felt as though they had drawn the short straw. A man who had been attacked by a monster during his patrol was found in a terrible condition. Vaya contacted them, asking if they could read the status of the injured person, but they were unable to do so. Unfortunately, the team member who had relayed the information, Fuka Morse, was dead. Morse had many followers and Villa couldn't imagine they would be granted permission for espionage activities. She decided to investigate further. Fuku and the others arrived at the Infinity Library, the wonderland of books. Oli shouted that the line ahead of them was extremely long. Fuku explained that it was normal for adventurers to flock to a new dungeon, but this was excessive. IAS revealed that the Appraiser Association was also conducting research, and as they had heard, the library contained all kinds of books. Among them, there might even be historical records dating back ages, possibly including information about existing monsters. To find such a book, Ice thought it would likely come in an astronomical price, and she understood that waiting 200 hours exceeded her expectations. They noticed that the dungeon's visitors seemed to be seeking the believers, but they couldn't understand why people from the Lord area were also in line. Aaliyah, irritated, was about to confront them, but Ias and Fuku stopped her, reminding her that it wasn't something that concerned the Lord area. Just then, a man approached and scolded them for making a commotion, calling them brats and telling them to go back. Air was furious with him, but to her surprise, the people around them were showing respect to the man, even Ez. When Fuku asked if she knew him, Ez was surprised that Fuku didn't recognize Maki, a veteran S-rank hunter. Fuku remarked that Maki must have made quite an impression, though Ellie wasn't fond of his hairstyle. Maki approached them and asked about their intentions. After Eos introduced herself and Fuku mentioned his name, Maki was shocked and asked if he was the son of Ariko. Fuku confirmed, and Maki, surprised at how much Fuku had grown, noted that it had been 20 years since they last met. He then offered to guide them. As Fuku explained that they weren't there as believers in the books, Maki clarified that he was inviting them as he was once a student of Fuku's mother. Maki led them inside, and Is was thrilled to see the vast collection of books. Aaliyah commented that it really seemed like there were books from other worlds as well. Aaliyah became emotional hearing her praise. Maki explained that books were living proof of humanity's achievements and the gods' influence. He then pulled out a book that opened a hidden area, saying it contained treasures of unimaginable blessings. Is and Ayla followed him as they headed downstairs, and Maki told them they should greet the god of this place. He opened a tiny door leading them further inside. Fuku and Aes wondered if Fuku's mother had been a disciple here and what the circumstances had been. Maki invited them in, and once inside, Aaliyah immediately recognized the god present. The god asked what Aaliyah was doing there. Fuku asked if they were acquainted, and Aaliyah replied that the god was Liver, the god of books, ranked 72. He was barely a god, much like Aaliyah, and was a jirigami. She couldn't help but admire that Liver had done well to maintain his rank as 72. Eli's own rank was 71, which explained the rivalry between them. Fuku and Eis discussed another pillar of the gods, which was soon to become a gopher. Aaliyah and Liver were still at odds. Maki asked Liver why he was in such a rush. Liver replied that it was his business and Maki didn't need to worry about it. Then he asked why they were there. Aaliyah, trying to intimidate, declared that they were hunting for the believers. Liver warned her not to declare her intentions to obstruct business in front of an admin god. Is explained to Aaliyah that they had come to look for the album for Fuku. Liver, noticing the situation, suggested he could easily increase his own followers and rank quickly. He then asked Maki to throw Elia out of the place. Fuku interjected, saying they had come to look for an album that had been destroyed along with his house. He would keep an eye on Elia, so he asked Liver not to throw her out. Maki also expressed interest in the album and supported their search. Liver, finally conceding, agreed to let them look for it. They rushed outside quickly and Maki told Liver that he would watch over them, so Liver didn't have to accompany them. Liver, however, cautioned them not to run in the library. He added that there was no book in Library 8 without the proper proof. Grace couldn't be obtained without it. He then asked how they would thank him, saying he would catch up with them later before leaving. As they walked, Is mentioned that because of Maki, they felt safe. Maki, however, didn't sense any aura of an adventurer from Fuku. He told them he was a bit curious about the abilities of the son of his former master. Is and Fuku were lagging behind slightly, and Fuku explained that he didn't have any adventurer skills. Is suggested that this could be a good opportunity for Fuku to learn something from Maki in the dungeon. Aaliyah wondered if there were any monsters in the area. As she spoke, she noticed that the books had evolved, and suddenly, the bear from one of the pictures started moving. It lunged at her, attempting to bite her head. Maki casually remarked, "Let's see what it can do." Ayas rushed to help Aaliyah but found the bear's veins weren't materializing, so she instinctively hugged Aaliyah for protection. Fuku quickly drew his sword using his guide to slay the imaginary bear. Once the threat was neutralized, he and Aes checked to see if Aaliyah was hurt. Fuku's luck was astonishing. Maki, surprised, remarked that it wasn't just luck. He then asked Fuku to explain himself. After Fuku provided an explanation, Maki finally understood. While it didn't seem like a physical attack, Fuku's luck made perfect sense. Fuku explained that his athletic abilities weren't particularly high. Everything had been reversed, with his luck increasing abnormally, while everything else turned negative. Maki believed the Alir's strong attack was likely a result of the guide ability in Fuku's sword, but for a D-rank adventurer, it was still an abnormal stroke of luck. Good luck and a strong constitution alone shouldn't have led to such a major comeback. Fuku apologized for not meeting expectations, explaining that his skill wasn't inherited from his mother. Ayas agreed and then asked Maki to teach them how to fight, as they had formed a party, but their fighting style was still unstable. Maki refused, saying, "Don't take this the wrong way, but he was just a mediocre adventurer. Perhaps their fighting style was different from any adventurer he have seen. He do have a few things he can teach him, but it's not guaranteed that it'll be the right approach for him." Fuku, determined, stated that he couldn't continue like this. He wanted to learn how to properly handle his powers, so he bowed and asked Maki to teach him how to fight. He expressed his desire to become a respectable adventurer. Maki, reminded of his past when he had begged Fuku's mother to teach him how to fight, smiled and said, "Life was long, Fuku. He could take his time to find the answer, but let him make one thing clear, that he don't have extraordinary luck like him, nor he was as kind as Oriko. So now let's start the lesson."